paradigm is a perspective or an ideology. It's a way of viewing something. And kind of like a horse with blinders on, it's going to influence the way that you would see something. So they can't look to the side, they can only look ahead because they're only seeing something in one way. But is that the way everything is? No, there's a lot of things outside of there, but it's blocked. So each of these perspectives blocks the way you can really interpret and understand history or the world in general. And that's going to be the limitations of each of these approaches. So what I want to do is I'm going to discuss all three of these, then I'm going to kind of open it up to class discussion, and you tell me which of them you think makes the most sense for explaining a history of the world. Because that's what all of these paradigms or perspectives are trying to do, explain the history of the world, but from the way that they see it. So all periods, all countries, all time periods, all different types of history. They're trying to make a general rule to explain all of history. And that's going to be one of the problems. That's so broad, how can you explain all of history? But let's see how they see it. Let me apologize in advance for my writing. I could say, hey, I haven't been writing for about 12 weeks, but I don't want to waste all my lives the first day. No, it's not going to get a whole lot better, but you'll get more used to it. And if you can't read something I wrote, feel free to ask. I'm not going to be real picky about grammar and punctuation or spelling, just as long as I can understand what you're talking about in your exams. And okay, question about history with dates. Now, I like dates because it helps me focus on what's happening in many different places at the same time. But some people become overly fixated on the dates. They begin thinking the dates are the most important thing, and they're really not. That's the easiest thing to look up. The causes are the important thing, and the events themselves. What caused these events? Why did it happen the way that it did? And as much as possible, I'm going to emphasize the connection between the present and the past. I don't want us to just look at history as something in the past that has nothing to do with anything of today. Because as I'm going to try to show today, all these perspectives, all these ways of viewing the world, they're not going to be that much different than the way we see things today. Because people don't change all that much. People are still greedy, people are still self-centered, people are still competitive, lazy, all these characteristics. It's just the circumstances around them change. As best example of that, COVID, all these things that we counted on, we saw suddenly we can't count on it, and then we have to find a way around it. And notice we quickly came up with ways around a lot of things. So we got used to wearing the stupid masks all the time. That got done with, well, hopefully forever, but at least for now. All right, so let's talk about each of these paradigms. The first one, the Marxist theory of history. All right, that is going to be named after Karl Marx. All right, and Karl Marx is famous for theory about what? Communism, good. He develops a theory of communism. And in that theory of communism, he talks about two social classes. Does anyone know what classes he talks about?
Middle class and the middle class?
Okay. Do you remember what he calls the middle class?
No, I don't.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
Okay, great. So the middle class or upper class would be the bourgeoisie, also called the capitalist. And they go up against the proletariat. All right, so we have the bourgeoisie or the capitalist versus the proletariat. One way of looking at the capitalist, you could, for easy sake, just think of it as the haves or the rich, and their versus the proletariat. Proletariat are the poor or the have-nots. All right, so the capitalists would be the people who have money, education, connections, social connections, power, specialized skills. And is that going to be the majority of the population or a small part of the population? Small part, yeah. So that's a small part of the population. That would be the haves. And the proletariat are the majority of the population. They're the have-nots. It's just like in our society, many more poor people than rich people. So Marx sees a constant class struggle between the haves and the have-nots, between the rich and the poor. They're fighting for everything. Okay, so Marx in particular is going to be looking at the factory system in England. And we have one owner of the factory. He's the one making most of the money. But is he doing most of the work? No. The people doing most of the work are poor. They don't, and they're interchangeable. With the start of the factory system, people become basically interchangeable because you don't need any kind of specialized skills. Anybody can work on an assembly line. So when anybody can do it, it makes you less valuable. Like why, is a McDonald's worker always kind of, seen as a low-level job? Because anybody can do it. You don't need any kind of specialized skills. Well, the same thing with the factory workers. But that's going to be the majority of people in society. So that's what upsets Marx. We have these few people making all the money, having all the power, and very few people, and the majority of people having next to nothing. All right, so that's one way of viewing the world, a class struggle between the haves and the have-nots. So how does this become a way of explaining history? Well, what makes it a Marxist theory of history rather than just Marxism is it's trying to explain history that way. So the Marxist theory of history says that all history has been determined in one way or another about struggle between the rich and the poor. The rich want to keep on to their power and stay rich. The poor want to become the new rich and have somebody else under them. So that's one way of explaining history. All right, now another way of looking at history is called the number 2 here, the great man theory of history. All right, the great man theory of history. Before we talk about exactly what that is there anything noticeable in that term? Anything that kind of stands out about it? Kind of sexist sounding, isn't it? Saying only men can be great. Okay, but then what do we mean by great? some people, looks are everything, somebody else, money's everything, somebody else, being well liked is everything, somebody else, security's everything. People are influenced by different things. All right, so what the great man theory of history is arguing, that in all time periods, history has been led by one or a few great men. Okay, well, what do we mean by great? Well, let me give you an example of some great men of history. Martin Luther King, Lincoln, George Washington, Hitler, Stalin, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Khrushchev, Osama bin Laden. So, what do you think is meant by great?
Powerful.
Powerful, good. It has nothing to do with morality at all. It can't, because morality is relative. One person's morality is not the same as somebody else's. For example, Osama bin Laden. Most of us here in a Western classroom, when they got him, or when you heard that they got him, you saw him as an evil figure. Is that necessarily the way it was seen around the world? No, parts of the Middle East, he was a great hero. The only one who had the guts to stand up to the domination of the West. That wouldn't be probably most of our perspective, but it's going to be where other people would see it. Who's to say who's right? And same thing, what some of you guys find important, people of the past, or even your own parents or grandparents, probably don't. Like, what's really important to most of you guys, let's say, particularly at this campus, the environment, green this, green that, recycling, save the earth. Is that important to everybody? A lot of people couldn't care less. I personally love when they double wrap everything and put it in shiny container. No, just kidding. No, they all right, or let's say cursing. Okay, a lot of you guys don't think twice about it. Every other word has an F in it. Think of the acronyms you use on the text. So no one's offended when you say that. Anyone your age, people. What about your grandparents? No, they're hard. Okay, I'm kind of in between because I'm not a grandparent age and I don't have kids, but I'm around a lot of college kids who use that language all the time. So, did a little bit on it. But that's it. Some people are horrified by it. You guys, it doesn't mean anything. You guys very noticing about racial slurs, which past generations couldn't care less about. And you care a lot about the environment, which once again, people of the past, for the most part, weren't that interested in. So, it shows all these things are relative. One thing's a big deal to somebody, it doesn't mean anything to somebody else. So the connection to that with the great man theory of history is the idea that history is being led by influential men of all time periods. So this theory, the great man theory of history, it argues that all of history has been led by one or two very influential men who led history in a certain direction for good or for bad. So those would be usually the ones you would think of as kind of dominating that age. So World War II led by, essentially Hitler and Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill. They were the great men of that age. Okay, so it argues that most people are not the ones that determine the age. Instead, it's these few great leaders who led it in a certain way, for good or for bad. So the main figure of that age. Okay, so the age of Clinton or the age of Trump, they were the ones who basically determined the society of that age. Most of us did not have that much influence, at least according to this theory. But then there is still the sexist element. Okay? Now notice it is saying great man. All right, now this theory is, I would say, reaches its peak about the 1950s. So at that point, they basically felt only men were influential enough to really lead an age. It's not that women couldn't necessarily, but they weren't given a chance. Could we still say that today? Yes and no. Yeah, I'm kind of like you. Yes and no. It's headed towards change, but not quite there yet. Yeah, what do you think?
I thought the word man was also kind of like as human in some
Okay,
context.
so that's the thing. Today we would probably say man is a human. Like they often just put he, because putting he, she, it is kind of awkward, you know. And I guess some people feel a little insulted. But yeah, I mean, at the time they definitely meant it as men because they felt there were very few women who could really lead an age. There are some exceptions, though. Can anyone name some exceptions? Who are some so important women that they basically dominated an age?
Rosa Parks.
She made a change, but was she enough to dominate the whole age? Okay, closer, but once again, as much as other people in that period, or she's just a memorable figure.
Joan of Arc.
All right, Joan of Arc, there's not too many others in that period, so that one might work. I would say some might even say Cleopatra. So there's selected few, but compare that to the number of men who dominated an age. You don't even have to think any time period. Oh yeah, this one. But then there's this idea that there's kind of women behind the scene influencing it, like Eleanor Roosevelt. She doesn't get nearly enough credit, a very important figure, but everyone just talks about her husband. But in any case, it means, all right, if we want to update it and say the great person theory of history, which today is the way we're heading. I mean, look, we have a female vice president. Things are out how she's done or how much she's going to be remembered, but she already stands out as the first one. And there have been prime ministers who have been women, very influential ones. But the theory basically says that in all time periods, there's been one or a few very influential figures who have led history in a certain direction, for good or for bad. Okay, so that's one way of understanding history. Any questions or comments about any of that? All right, so now let's look at this one, number 3, the Machiavellian theory of history. Does anyone know who Machiavelli was? Machiavelli was a statesman of the Italian Renaissance who worked for one of the Renaissance princes. Machiavelli wrote a famous book called The Prince. And he worked for Lorenzo de' Medici, a very powerful leader of the Italian Renaissance. See, during the Italian Renaissance, Italy was divided into 5 principalities. Italy was the place to be during the Renaissance, during the 14th century, the 15th century. Not only did all the money from the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, go into Italy, but it was also the trade route between the East and the West. So it was the important place of that time period. But it was not led by one person. There was instead 5 Renaissance princes. Now, if you were one of those Renaissance princes, would you be satisfied with just controlling part of Italy? Does that seem like human nature? You're going to be satisfied with part. No, everybody wants more, right? It's like, okay, let's say you live in, I don't know, Gladwins. You live in a really nice, big, comfortable house, probably better than about 95% of America, 98% of the world. Are you going to say, well, that's enough. We have many more rooms and we have people in it. We have a nice big yard. That's enough. Now, people living there, is that going to be the attitude? Do you get to live there if that's been your attitude? No. They're going to be the same ones who have a house in Margate. Because that's human nature. You want more. You have 1 degree, you want 2. Well, maybe not. You have 1 job, you want 2. No, usually not. You have 1 wife, you want, no. Not really accepted. We're not in Utah. But no. No, but you have 1 house, you're definitely going to want more than 1. You have 1 part of an area, you want the whole area. So Machiavelli works for one of the Renaissance princes, and he tells his Renaissance prince what he has to do to gain control over all of Italy.